The electric car race is really hotting up in India, and Tata Motors is definitely by far in the lead. Not only is it the largest selling EV manufacturer, it has just launched its second model, the Tigor EV, when other manufacturers haven't even launched their first. And talking to me about this is the man behind the whole EV strategy, Mr. Shailesh Chandra, who is right now the head of the passenger car division of Tata Motors. But Shailesh, even before he was at the helm of Tata Motors, he was behind the EV strategy. So, Shailesh, thanks for talking to us. This must be a very proud moment for you, especially since you, for the last couple of years, have really been spearheading the EV strategy. So, before we get into it, I just wanted a quick overview on the market right now. From what I understand, demand has just shot up exponentially. Was this as per expectation? Is it fuel prices driving this? What is going on in the market that's really, creating such a demand for EVs? I know the base is very, very small, but still there's a huge growth on it.
So thanks for the compliments, Hormazd. When we started our electrification journey in 2018, I would say it was the first product when we launched for the fleet segment and for the government demand. The demand was very less, and we had also done that because there was a greater focus of the government towards shared mobility. We quickly realized that when 90% of the demand is in the personal segment, we need to really address that for a deeper penetration of electric vehicles in the country. And that's the whole thinking behind the launch of Nexon EV in January 2020. When we had launched Nexon EV, frankly, when we got a certain number of bookings, we used to get about 300 bookings or so. We were very excited that there are so many takers of electric vehicles in the country. And as I'm speaking to you today, this would have gone sevenfold more, right?
So over 2,000 bookings?
Over 2,000 bookings, very close to what we get for diesel cars, for Nexon diesel, which itself is a very successful vehicle. So this is the kind of steep growth that we have seen in the demand for Nexon EV. You asked me what are the factors, and if I really reflect, the first factor is the 7,000 Nexon EV customers who had a very nice experience of the car, and they on their own have gone and posted on the social media about their experience. And that is coming from the horse's mouth, which is really increasing the confidence of all the buyers who are sitting on the other side of the fence. So I think this is one single big factor.
So the old adage, do dikhta hai, wo bikta hai, even works with EVs.
Exactly.
Right.
Second big factor I would say is the barriers around electrification, which was around the range anxiety, or for example, how you will charge a car, where we gave home charging solution, or for example, the availability of public charging infrastructure. Many of them were myths, and some of them were barriers, which have also got broken, to some extent, I would say. The other factor is the government incentives, especially the state incentives, I would say, which is stopping the incentive of what central government had already given. So this is also driving a lot of excitement and also making it more affordable to own an EV. So this is another factor, which I'm seeing. All this in combination, I would say, is creating this massive, pace that we are seeing in the adoption of electric vehicles.
And the tipping point, the fuel, of course, is
yes, that of course, you are rightly, as you mentioned today, if you see the advantage of electric vehicles versus a petrol or a diesel vehicle is that you get a benefit of 6.5 rupees per kilometer. In a personal segment, typically a customer would drive 12,000 kilometers in a year, so you are actually saving 70 to 80,000 rupees in a year. And in a 4 to 5 year ownership period, you would save about 3.5 to 4 lakh. So that's also a big factor which is playing in favor of the EVs.
Right. Shailesh, I want to stick with the Tigor EV. Frankly, this was your first EV with, especially with the fleet sales to government agencies and all that. But that was 72 volts, yes. Limited range, not too great performance. Quite frankly, there were issues with that vehicle also. Lessons learned from that, lesson being that number one, you have to have a 300 volt architecture or a high voltage architecture rather for the passenger segment, or do you think you could have got away with the 72 volt at a lower price or no? I mean, what was your thinking in going to the higher voltage architecture, and obviously lessons learned from the experience you had, with supplying government agencies?
So the first vehicle which we had launched, At that time, we have nomenclatured it Tigor EV, but now it has been rechristened as Express T. Right? And that model is going to still exist because of some inherent benefits in that model.
Right.
But as far as this Tigor EV is concerned, based on Ziptron, this is going to be completely meant for the personal segment, because here the requirement is around performance, new tech features. This is what our customer is looking for. In the fleet segment, it is slightly different, because in a low voltage architecture, the biggest advantage that you get is that you can give a fast charger which is very inexpensive as compared to what you would need as a fast charger for a high voltage kind of a system.
Right.
Fleet segment typically wants a captive fast charger.
Right. So
and therefore, I can bundle the captive charger along with that, so that the total cost of ownership, which is the key focus of the fleet segment, is served well.
Right.
So low voltage architecture is very well serving the need of the fleet segment, whereas high voltage architecture meets the aspirational requirements of the personal segment.
Right.
So these will be two very differentiated products, meeting very different requirements of the two customer segments.
Right. The other thing I want to talk about specifically on this is, performance is pretty good, 75 horsepower for this segment. Probably it'll be the quickest accelerating compact sedan, that's fine. I want to talk on the battery size, 20 kilowatt hour battery. Now, the sense I get is,
26.
26. Yeah, 26 kilowatt hour battery side. The point I'm trying to get at is, do you think it now makes more sense to have maybe slightly smaller batteries, which is good for city running, because you get a cost advantage, a weight advantage, and the fact that people are charging at home, and a range of, let's say, even around 200 kilometers is enough to suffice for that, and there's no point carrying the weight and cost of a bigger battery.
So when we really ventured into the personal segment with the conceptualization of Nexon EV, we had done a survey, right, in terms of when a customer is ready to buy an electric vehicle. One critical input came from there was, if you don't give a real world range of 200 kilometers, 220 kilometers to be actually specific, they would get into a range anxiety situation. So we have taken that as the floor level for whatever model we come with. If we downsize the battery further, you would get into that zone, which will be red for the customers.
So you think this is the absolute threshold?
I think this is the threshold level where you get the right balance of price, range, performance, as well as features. And this is the sweet spot that we had hit in the Nexon, and so would be the case for Tigor EV. So we would stick to this number, because if you bring the range further down, it will only create anxiety, and that will not be good for that option.
And bigger battery will mean more cost.
Bigger would mean. So this is a game of optimization, is what I would say.
So, clearly you've got a smaller battery than the Nexon. So I guess the focus, this is going to be a more city-centric car. So you can get away with a slightly lower range, but it's not that much of a low range, because being a lighter car, obviously, physics comes into account. So I think 312, 306. So you think this is where you're going to be going further with future EVs?
So as far as range is concerned, Hormazd, the lower battery pack is because of the lighter weight of the vehicle. This would be about 150 kgs lesser as compared to an Nexon EV. So it gets that benefit. And also, you would very well know that as compared to a CUV, this is more aerodynamic, and therefore the drag forces act less. So you are able to get a better range out of this. So therefore, this is pretty much similar in terms of your real range as compared to Nexon EV. So this would deliver you despite a lesser battery pack. So that's the reason with a reduced battery pack, you are able to deliver the car at a certain affordable level of price.
Right.
So this is where I see.
Right. And, just coming to the future, you talked about this is going to be your future kind of a sweet spot in terms of battery size. But talking about future products, now there's been a very, I would say, a bold and even ambitious statement made by Tata Motors of 10 EVs by 2025. We've already 1 year down the road. To me, it seems like a very ambitious timeline, because we know how products are developed. Okay, you could have this, you could have the Altos, you could have the Punch also electrified, but I'm not getting beyond 5 models. So do you think it's possible, or what's on the anvil? Because from what I understand, you right now don't even have a dedicated Born Electric skateboard in the oven.
Yeah, so Hormazd 10 products is what the chairman also announced in the AGM, and this is over a period of 5 years. See, our approach is very simple, that we would go with the evolution of demand. We will go with the evolution of the battery prices as they are falling down. And on the other side, you have also one factor that with the emission norms, there is a conventional vehicle price which is also rising. So there are interplays of all these three things which are happening. And in this evolution, you have to see the value creation for both customer as well as for the business, right? In the initial phase where there is less exposure of the customers and the market to electric vehicles, conversion route serves you the best because it gives you agility to launch the products in a shorter duration and expose the market to understanding the electric vehicles and breaking the myths and barriers and taking the demand to the next level so that it builds a case for the next level of investments to be made. Next opportunity would be, because if battery prices are at a certain level and if you come with you talked about native EVs. The biggest benefit of native EVs you get when you give a bigger battery. If you give a bigger battery today at the current level of battery prices, you will be outpriced and the adoption is going to be very low and you will create a value destruction case for the business. But at the same time, I would like to confirm that a steady state world in electric vehicles is going to be that of non-EVs. And this is where we would gravitate towards, from a conversion to new native EVs.
Right.
But it will be timed properly so that there's a case for native EV products with very different value proposition. And there might also be an intermediate stage where you would like to further adapt your current architectures, which are serving the ICE products, to be more enabled for electrification as an intermediate step.
So could one assume that the ALFA platform could evolve into a specialized EV platform, which kind of is a sort of, let's say, in halfway house between the converted products, which is fundamentally Nexon and Tigor, towards born electric? So because I think there's quite a time frame, I would imagine this process would be around 7-8 years at least. Yeah.
I would not imagine that kind of a long term, in terms of, I think many of these options will run parallel to each other in the market, I would say, because they will bring different kind of value proposition. There will be customers who are very conventional, would go with the current set of body style. They are more comfortable with this. So all these options will run parallelly. I'll not talk about any specific platform, but I think you need to give enablements in the current architectures we have. We have limited number of architectures, which give you an opportunity to give more battery into the architecture as the battery prices would come down to take it to the next level of range enhancement.
Right.
So this is something which...
But to do that, just to press you on that, you do have certain compromises. One is obviously the weight goes up because the existing platforms are generally fundamentally heavy, and ground clearance also can be an issue, which we have seen. Typically ground clearance drops in this vehicle because of the way the battery is packaged. Are these two things compromises or something, a bit of a challenge you have to work around?
In certain categories of products, you can face that problem. And when I say enablements in a certain platform, you will do those enablements to overcome those issues.
Right.
So one can get into the challenges, but there are ways of overcoming that as you are, progressively enhancing the enablement of, housing more battery pack.
Right. The other challenge, Shailesh, I want to talk about is the supply chain. Now, I don't know whether you are open now with a figure of what is, let's say, the localized content of the EV powertrain or the EV bits of it, the battery pack. I would imagine not much. A lot of it is important, fundamentally because the supply chain isn't developed yet. We don't have a local supply chain. Is this a challenge? Is this putting cost pressures because you have to rely on certain imports? Because, as I said, there's no supply chain. And what is the way forward? Do you see the supply chain developing rapidly, or is it just going to be, an evolution which you all will have to follow?
So 1 year back, this was a major concern, Hormazd, because it is an issue of chicken and egg, right? How do you invest as a supplier when you don't see demand, right? There's a sentiment change which has happened in the last 1.5 years where, for two reasons, I would say. One, that there is an adoption of EVs that you're seeing at the pace at which it is. And second, that government with the FAME2 program came with a very well articulated approach for localization, which was phased manufacturing plan. And the beauty of that was that it defined which aggregate needs to be localized when, which gave confidence to the vendors also that now it is sure that if I invest, there will be OEMs who are considering electric vehicles who might come to us. So there is some easing out, I would say, in terms of the sentiments of suppliers to take the plunge and invest here.
And some clarity and visibility.
And some clarity, but still there's work to be done. In absence of more and more suppliers coming to really take the bet on EVs, we work with companies within the group like Tata Auto Components, which invested into battery pack, which is investing into certain other critical EV powertrain components in similar to what has been laid down in the phase manufacturing plan. And as the volume ramp up is going to happen, this is going to become easier and easier, where you'll start seeing the investment coming from the suppliers, is the way I see.
Right. And just looking at your current platforms, since one gets is with the existing platforms and enhancements of it, the EV or electrification is limited to maybe 4 to 4.2 meter long cars. What do you think of the bigger SUVs, or is that much later? Generally, that's going to happen a lot later, and we'll see a lot of ICE in those cars, and before they get electrified.
Again, it goes back to the discussion on the evolution, which I said. And as the battery prices come down, it will create opportunities in the segments which are more value conscious, smaller segments at a lesser price points. At the same time, on the more heavier ones, because SUVs, you want to go for excursion trips where you need more range and there is a curve weight to support. So you need to give more battery pack. So there will be a case for both affordable categories as well as SUVs as the battery prices also evolve over a period of time. And therefore you'll have the opportunity of also coming with electric vehicles in that category of vehicles also. And when you do a grounds up skateboard, you'll have opportunities coming from that also.
Right. And last question, Shailesh, I think one big advantage I see with Tata Motors being the largest EV car maker today is the kind of data and let's say, experience you have with EV customers. What are the nuances you've picked up from them? Is it around charging infrastructure? Is it around range? Is it around cost? Where do you see between this trinity of barriers, which one is really playing out to be the biggest deterrent and which one is not such a deterrent?
So there have been many learnings, not only from Nexon EV, but also from Tigor, EV, which was the Express T, which I nomenclatured it now. There are many use cases learnings which have come out of that. One very notable one was the highway range, right? When we had conceptualized Nexon EV, we had a certain assumption on how much would be the highway driving versus a city driving, and therefore the optimization of range was done, as per that. But in the real situation, you saw more and more people going for highway drive because of the performance and thrill of driving these.
Much more than you anticipated.
Much more than we anticipated. And therefore, we optimized that by, adjusting the region and all, giving it more posting and all. So that led to optimization of range, and that has been a feedback for this vehicle also. Then on the charging infrastructure side, we saw that there are many players who are coming, different EVSC players, as we say. And there were compatibility challenges that we were seeing. So we have tried to also sort out those challenges. There have been many optimization on the algorithm software which has gone straight into this product as a learning. So there are many of these kind of learnings over 35 million kilometers that we have driven. And this is a knowledge and the nuances of the Indian market use cases which we have incorporated in the product.
And if there's been one surprise, is it the fact that charging infra is not a problem, because typically people charge it at home?
Yes.
I mean,
so that has been a big revelation, because when we really analyze the data, 95% of the times our Nexon users are charging the car at their home. And I think it, from some time from now, people will forget going to fuel stations.
In fact, in a way, it makes it even more practical than an ICE car, because you don't have to go to a fuel station at all.
Absolutely.
It's literally the fuel coming to you.
Correct.
Right. And just sticking to ICE vehicles and this thing, last question, where do you see the market, where do you see EV penetration? Let's say 2025. We've seen who's bringing what. Where do you think we'll go? Some people are saying as much as 25%. I think that's a bit ambitious, purely because the number of models may not be there to support that kind of volume. What is Tata Motors' kind of projection of the way EV penetration is going to be for the next decade?
So, Hormazd, partially you have answered, because when you said that number of models would determine that. So it's very dependent on, how many models you bring. But I just gave you the example of Nexon EV. Nexon is a successful product, selling 10,000 now in the market. And the demand generation for Nexon EV, you are already seeing that is roughly the number which I talked about, 2,000 plus, which is a 20% penetration. Which means that if you really bring, and this is when still you have certain barriers to be addressed, charging infrastructure, for example, or overall overcoming of the mental barriers that customers have. So there is a huge promise, because in electric car you get everything. You get the performance, you get low running cost, you get automatic, you get technology, right?
And no maintenance.
And no maintenance. The only one thing which is still of concern to the customer, what about charging infrastructure on highways, right? What about the resale value, right? What about the battery price, battery if it does not work and if there is a failure. But some of them we have been able to address through warranty, which is higher in terms of 8 years warranty, 1,60,000 kilometers.
Right.
But these concerns, fast forward the situation, 1.5 years from now, these will be overcome. And I think then the penetration potential is very high. Our chairman had declared in the AGM that we will be targeting 25% penetration in our portfolio in the next 5 years. So we believe that that's the potential in the next 5 years, if there are enough options which are available in the market. And these new technology areas, you see a hockey stick jump in the demand after an inflection point, they say. So I would believe this will be a very high penetration scenario as we move forward.
Well, on that very exciting and kind of encouraging note for EVs, just want to congratulations on another, what I think is going to be a successful launch. And Tata Motors again really storming ahead in the EV race, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Hormazd.
Thank you.